Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Thank you all for being here, especially on a rainy night like this. Okay, just going to jump right on in and talk about the thing that everybody's talking about, and that is the Mueller report. Have you had a chance? Have you had a chance to read it? Much of it?
First of all, thanks a lot. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for having me. Good to be with you. So I've read large portions of it. I have not read the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of it is also redacted, so I couldn't read the whole thing even if I wanted to.
Wait, not a lot of it's redacted.
Well, I mean there are important parts that are redacted, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've read what's been put out there.
Mm-hmm. And given what you've read, should impeachment proceedings be started immediately? Because that's the debate that's happening now within the party, and certainly what's happening on television.
Yeah, I believe that there are grounds to start impeachment proceedings. What I hear most congressional leaders saying right now is that they're going to subpoena Bob Mueller, and then they're going to, gather additional information, further the investigation, and then make a decision about where they go from there.
Well, there are people in the party, though, who say that the process that you just laid out, one that I actually agree with, is too slow. That the Mueller report itself should be enough for Congress, when they come back after Easter break, start those impeachment proceedings now. Is that the wrong way to go?
I actually believe that there are grounds to impeach the president now. Mm-hmm. Because I think what they're going to find is when they subpoena Bob Mueller, basically you're going to get a fuller explanation of what the report found, which was these several instances of the president trying to obstruct justice. So the decision that they're going to have to come to, whether they do that 2 weeks from now or they do that 6 months from now, is going to be, do you hold this president accountable for trying to obstruct justice or not? Mm-hmm. That's still going to be the fundamental question, I believe, when we get to the end of the inquiry.
And so then what would you counsel those Democrats within the party, among the party faithful, and those on Capitol Hill who are champing at the bit to do this right now? How do you counsel patience?
Well, I mean, I guess right now that's the route that they're going to go. It seems like there's more support in Congress for subpoenaing Bob Mueller and doing further investigation. So they're going to do that. I mean, my words of advice would be to be as transparent as possible, because that's what was lacking in the administration. We want to show the American people the work, so to speak. I would also say that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Mm-hmm. I'm running for president. I'm out there all the time speaking to people about the things that they concern themselves with when they wake up in the morning. If their kid is going to get a good education, are they going to have health care when they need it? Are there good job opportunities out there for them and for their family? At the same time, I hear that people want somebody in Washington, in the White House, who is accountable, right? And they want to know that somebody is leveling with them. And what the president has done by trying to obstruct justice is that he's shown a level of dishonesty that should not be rewarded. Mm-hmm. And I think that people will support holding the president accountable for trying to obstruct justice.
Mm-hmm. When you're out on the campaign trail, and you've been out there since what, mid-January?
Yeah, I announced on January 12th.
Yes, since mid-January. How many people have come up to you and asked you more than one question about the Mueller probe?
Specifically about the Mueller
mm-hmm.
probe? Yeah, it's a small percentage. Most people ask about healthcare or about jobs or about education. Most people do not ask specifically about the Mueller report.
And so this is not something that the American people, at least the American people that you've come into contact with, they're not focused on that.
That's not their top concern, no.
What's their top concern?
Well, those bread and butter issues, right? People are worried about the future for them and for their family and everything that has to do with their livelihood, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not also concerned with making sure that leaders in Washington or wherever they are in their local community and their state capital are held accountable and are honest and, That's still a concern. That's just not the most burning concern that people have.
Mm-hmm. Do the American people you've met on the campaign trail, do they still feel that they've been forgotten by the people they've sent to Washington? Are they still angry the way they were angry in 16?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still something of a disillusionment there. But it also feels different because the cross current that we're dealing with now is this shock to the system of the dishonesty and lack of accountability for this president. And so what I hear out there, now mind you, right now I'm dealing more with a Democratic primary audience, right? And I'm competing in the Democratic primary. What I hear is that people want to make sure that we change presidents. And they just have this very strong, that we have to get rid of this guy at any cost. And so that's why, when you see these polls about what's most important to people, electability is one of the most important because they want to know, how are you going to beat Donald Trump? They want to know, look, we're going to beat Donald Trump, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I hear.
Well, Donald Trump is unlike any president we have seen in recent or modern memory. He is an asymmetrical fighter who couldn't care less about the rules or the law or customs or anything. So, given that, how would you respond to the sucker punch that's going to come from Donald Trump if you're the nominee? Because it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're going to beat Donald Trump by trying to beat Donald Trump. The analogy, I use two analogies. One of them is in sports, for those folks that watch sports, right? A great athlete that's seen as invincible or a great team is hardly ever beaten by a team or another athlete that has exactly the same skill set as that team or that athlete. And a couple of weeks ago on YouTube, I was rewatching the 1974 fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. George Foreman was this, hulking, undefeated heavyweight champion. Some folks will probably remember that fight if you watched it back then. I was born in 1974, but I wasn't alive. And Ali came in with this rope-a-dope strategy that was different and unexpected and defeated George Foreman, who was seen as invincible. Or when UCLA lost to the University of Houston, I think also in the 70s, they had won, I think, 88 straight games or something like that. And you have to have a different skill set. The other analogy is in programming, network programming, right? If one network has on a great comedy, another network will counter-program with a great drama, or sci-fi movie. What is the opposite, or what is, a different skill set? We have to be, first of all, you have somebody that has been so divisive that you have to be somebody that's trying to unite the country. You have somebody that's demonstrated a lack of integrity. People are looking for somebody that's demonstrated integrity and honesty in public service. You have somebody that seems so focused on 37% of the people that he considers his base. So you have to be a president for everybody. And you have somebody who represents the past that wants to make this country something again. And I want to represent the future and make it better than it ever has been.
So then from what I hear is if you get the sucker punch, you're not responding.
Yeah, I wouldn't respond by trying to, you're never going to out-gutter Donald Trump. You're not going to out-gutter Donald Trump. So you have to be different. I think you have to be able to stand up to him and push back and have backbone, but also to offer a strong, compelling, positive vision for the country's future that resonates with the people whose vote you're asking for. And that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to lay out a good vision for the future of the country.
And that's one of the reasons why when people ask me, So rank the people, rank the candidates and their unveilings, and then it was the quaint days when there were only 8. Now
Now we're
today,
like
there are
21.
20. Or maybe 21 with
well,
says
when
multiple.
Biden gets in, it'll be 21, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
so we're at 20 and counting.
Yeah.
But back then, I said that you and Senators Klobuchar and Harris, to me, had the 3 sort of shining examples, because in your speeches, you presented an aspirational vision for the future. And one of the more compelling parts of your, or notes of your announcement, is that you took the same bus that you did as a kid to the location where you made your announcement. Could you just talk a little bit about what that was like for you to go back to those days when you were a little kid, just thinking about what your future might be, and now you're rolling there to announce that you're running for president of the United States? Why'd you do that, and why are you running for president of the United States?
So on January 12th, my brother Joaquin and I and my daughter Karina took the bus, the number 68 bus that Joaquin and I used to take, because we grew up with my mother. She raised us as a single parent after our parents split up when we were 8, and we didn't have a car, and so we would always take the bus everywhere. And it was obviously tremendously meaningful to now take that ride as an adult with my own daughter now, Karina, who's 10, and then to do it, to go announce also on the west side of San Antonio in that same area for President of the United States, because my family story is this immigrant's American dream story. And it's a story that you can tell no matter whether it's somebody of Mexican heritage or Irish heritage or German or wherever you're from, that has been sort of the great story of this country. We grew up with my grandmother and my mom, and my grandmother had worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter because she came from Mexico when she was 7, and because her parents had passed away, and she never got a formal education, so she worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter. Raised my mom as a single parent. My mom became the first one to graduate from high school and then go on to college. She raised us as a single parent. We went to the public schools and had a chance to go to college, go to law school, become professionals as lawyers. And so to me, it was just an affirmation of what's possible in the country. Mm-hmm. And I'm running, at base, I'm running because I feel tremendously fortunate to have had the kind of opportunity in this country that I've had. And I feel like I've reached my dream. And I want to make sure that no matter who you are in the country, where you live, what your background is, that you can also reach your dreams. And the vision that I've painted for the future of our country of being the smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation is a blueprint for how I think we need to get there.
Mm-hmm. What you just said is something actually we hear from, or I should say, at least I have heard from every candidate who's run for president since I've been alive, and I'm older than you. Mm-hmm. But not by much, but I am older than you. And so why does your story and your rationale for running, why is it more imperative now than, say, when Bill Clinton ran in '92, or when Hillary Clinton ran in 2016, or Al Gore in 2000, or any of the other Democratic candidates who also said they were running because they wanted to make the American dream available to everyone?
Because this president is specifically trying to stamp out the version of the American dream that I've lived, this immigrant's American dream story, especially those coming from the southern border. And they're not only trying to cut undocumented immigration, but also legal immigration into this country. And so he has a very narrow vision for the future of this country and who should be able to achieve their dreams here. My view is broad and expansive and inclusive. And that's why I think it's particularly pressing, because we're going to make a decision in this next election whether we keep going down the road, this myopic road, narrow-minded road of only people who look a certain way and come from a certain place should be able to achieve their dreams, or are we going to embrace again this notion that we're a bigger America and that no matter who you are, you should be able to achieve your dreams? That's what I represent.
one of the big proposals you put out was an immigration plan. And immigration, just as an issue, has become so emotional that, I mean, I don't know if we can have, as a nation, a rational conversation about immigration. Why shouldn't Americans be afraid of America's immigration policies as they stand right now?
Well, they should be afraid of his immigration policies as they stand right now. And the reason for them, let me start off with something that is going to sound politically incorrect to some people, which is that we actually need in this country a lot of those immigrants who are coming across the border. What you see happening right now is that first of all, baby boomers are turning 65 in record numbers. They're drawing on Social Security. We need a young and vibrant, energetic workforce for the future. Our birth rate has been declining, right? So we're not replenishing the number of people contributing to the Social Security Trust Fund, right? We see countries around the world like Japan that are grappling in spades with this issue of an aging population. And we have an unemployment rate right now of 3.8, 3.9%. In some places, it's about 2%, right? If you take states like Iowa that have a super low unemployment rate. You have a number of industries, whether it's the agriculture industry, the hospitality industry, the construction industry, that plainly rely on that labor. And so I've been blunt and said, look, we need a lot of these folks. Some people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. And that if we're not careful, in 20 or 30 years, we're going to be begging for immigrants to come into this country and to help ensure that people can be prosperous. So what I would do is I just take a very different view of how we should approach immigration. Instead of treating these folks like criminals and making crossing the border a criminal violation, I would actually make it a civil violation, which is the way that it used to be treated from 1929 to 2004. Doing that would reduce the backlog of people that are stuck in this system without an answer about what they're going to do, and they're kind of in limbo. I would invest in the number of judges that we need in immigration judiciary to get to an answer on those cases of asylum or people who are here who are undocumented. I would increase the number of refugees that we take into this country. You know, the Obama administration had a plan to get up to the statutorily mandated cap or ceiling of 110,000, but I believe that we're only between 30 and 40,000 these days. I would invest in a long-term solution to the fact that so many people are coming here from Central America, right? 92,000 people came here last month, and mostly from Central America. And why are they coming here? Like, why would a mother decide that she's going to bring her 6-month-old infant through over 1,000 miles of a dangerous journey to get here? It's because there's no safety. They can't find safety and opportunity in their home country. So I've called for essentially the equivalent of a 21st century Marshall Plan so that people can find safety and opportunity there instead of having to come and knock on the doorstep of the United States for that. And we can do that in a mutually beneficial way, and one that actually gets to the root of the challenge. I mean, so you can see that I just have a very different vision. I don't buy into the narrative that the folks who are coming over here present a terrorist threat or national security threat. And I also don't buy into the idea that we have to choose between being compassionate and having a secure border. We have a border that is as secure as it's ever been. We have thousands of personnel down there. We have guns, we have boats, we have helicopters, we have planes, we have security cameras all over the place. And we can maintain its security because I agree with a secure border, but we don't have to be cruel. Mm-hmm. We can be compassionate. And so I'm challenging the American people to choose compassion instead of cruelty.
Let me ask you about a few other domestic policy questions. Senator Elizabeth Warren put out her big free college proposal today. I think it was today. Time moves so quickly. So many things happen in a given day. What do you make of her plan? Is that viable?
Oh, I think, she's also presented a way to fund that, right, through this wealth tax. And so I think that, is it viable? I have not looked at the plan. It came out today, but in the outlines of it, yes, I would have to say it probably is viable. I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to propose my own plan dealing with education, including how we grapple with student loan debt. I applaud Senator Warren. Out of all of the candidates, people have noticed probably by now that Senator Warren has proposed the most policy so far. Of what she's proposed, the one that actually I found most appealing and intriguing was her universal child care proposal, because I do think that that is something that burdened so many families. But I also believe that there is a place to relieve student debt and also to ensure that going forward people can get at least tuition-free public university, community college, apprenticeship programs, so that you take care of both people going forward and also people who have incurred just thousands or tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt.
Since you brought up universal child care, that reminded me that here in New York City right now, the city is grappling with a measles outbreak.
Yeah.
And so let's fast forward in time. Mr. President, there's a measles outbreak in New York City. What do you do?
Well, I think that the number one thing that we have to do right away is make sure that you do everything you can to contain it. And that means taking precautionary measures within the schools, supporting the New York public schools as they do that. The longer term thing that we need to do is an education campaign that continues to promote vaccination. My understanding is that one of the big challenges here and why, the community is more susceptible to a measles outbreak is because you do have a number of parents who have not had their children vaccinated. The lower the percentage of children who are not vaccinated, I think the better. Some people have asked, would you absolutely require a child to be vaccinated or mandate vaccination? And on that policy question, I'm still giving that thought. But I do believe that our children and the community is safer when more people are vaccinated.
On criminal justice, you made a point of bringing it up in your speech. And in doing my research, I looked on your website looking for the policy paper that I found on immigration and looking on the criminal justice. And it's under this, you call it a reimagined justice system. But I couldn't find any specifics. So in a Castro administration, what does a reimagined justice system look like?
So the immigration proposal was the first of a set of policy proposals that we're going to unveil next. In the next couple of months, we're looking at education and housing, and then we'll go on with the different subject matters, policies throughout the course of the campaign. But what it means is several things. I was at the University of Utah about 2 months ago with a group that focuses they're officing out of the university there, but they focus on education programs for people who are incarcerated. And we were having a conversation about people who are incarcerated. And I forget what I said, but one of the people there said, the problem isn't really a second chance. The problem is that too many people who end up incarcerated don't get a first chance in life. Right? So the first thing that I want to do, right, when it comes to making sure that less people end up in the criminal justice system is invest in universal pre-K and child care in our public schools so that less people find themselves tangled up in the criminal justice system. I want to build on the First Step Act that was just passed by Congress and signed by the president. Continue with sentencing reform, with bail reform, invest in our public defender system across the country, because in too many states, our public defenders are overworked, having to represent too many people, and the quality of their representation suffers because of that. I would legalize marijuana and also go back and have the states expunge the records of people who got caught up in that. I would also build on the work of the Obama administration's task force on policing in the 21st century. and work so that no matter who you are, what the color of your skin is, or what neighborhood you live in this country, that you're treated the same. I mean, we saw that video yesterday of the young man in Broward County, Florida, that had his head banged against the ground, and he was pepper sprayed and then body slammed. About a month ago, I was in Charleston, South Carolina, 2 blocks away from the Mother Emanuel AME Church, where Dylan Roof in 2015 went and murdered 9 people while they were worshiping. And then a few hours later, he was apprehended without incident by the police, as he should be. But then what about Eric Garner? What about Tamir Rice? What about Stephon Clark? What about all of these young black men, mostly, who are not treated the same way by police? We need to reform our police departments, because that is not a case of bad apples. That is a case of a structural problem, and we need to fix it.
Well, speaking of structural problem, one issue that's been bubbling up and been a part of the national conversation for a few weeks now is reparations. Where are you on the question of reparations? And are you in support of, I believe it's H.R. 3?
40, I think.
H.R. 40.
Jackson Lee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Her bill to set up a commission to look at reparations. Can you talk about that? Where are you on that?
Yeah, I support that. I've long believed
a commission.
Support her legislation to appoint a commission that would make a recommendation to the president on how we should move forward with reparations. And I believe that we should find a way to deliver reparations and an apology for slavery. And this is why. Because just as we have developed over time in our country these moral assets, in many ways the United States has been a leader when it comes to freedom, democracy, opportunity, the values that all of us hold dear. We have these moral assets. When you walk in different countries around the world, oftentimes there's a certain level of respect that you get as an American. Even, none of us were there when the Constitution was written. We weren't there to march at the Edmund Pettus Bridge or there with the women who marched 100 years ago for women's suffrage. But you've inherited these moral assets. We've also inherited some moral debts. And one of those that we've never paid is slavery. And I don't believe that we're ever going to truly heal in this country until we address that. And we can think that we're moving forward as one nation, but I don't think that we ever completely will. I've also said that if people want to think about it a different way, under the Constitution, as a matter of law, if somebody takes your property, if the government takes your property, we compensate you for that. Well, why wouldn't you compensate somebody who actually was property or considered property as sanctioned by the state? And sometimes people say, well, nobody alive today was a slaveholder or a slave. And I say, well, if the government came and they took your property today and then you passed away tomorrow, your estate would still have a claim against the government for that. Right? We owe these debts. And now I'm addressing some of the harder questions on this, but then people say, well, okay, if you believe this, then what is the solution? Where do you fall on this? Mm-hmm. And frankly, some people say, look, isn't it a cop-out to just say that we're going to appoint a commission, right? No, what do you think the answer is? I would say, number one, that in my view of things, it's something that is direct to the descendants of slaves. But I believe that the more important thing is actually the process that we go through as a nation if we were going to take this up. I analogize this to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. We need to go through a process of people from around the country who are respected in their communities, who come forward, and who transparently come up with a path forward. I don't believe that something this sensitive and meaningful can only be the work of one person. I believe there's more power in a process that involves community. and that would be stronger and would heal the country in a more substantive way than just one person's idea of it, even though I have a rendition in my own mind of what it should be.
Let me get you on some foreign policy questions before we go to Q&A, and I'm looking at the clock. It'd probably be about, well, I'm not going to tell you so you don't run out the clock. So during the 2008 campaign, then Senator Obama said he would talk to America's enemies without preconditions, and he was roundly criticized for that as naive. During the 2012 campaign, Mitt Romney said that Russia was America's greatest threat, and he was roundly criticized as being out of step. So, given that tradition, what's your audacious foreign policy pronouncement for which you'll be criticized today but praised as prescient tomorrow?
I have no idea what people will praise tomorrow or hate tomorrow. I mean, I would just say that what's on my mind is that the United States be able to maintain its economic prosperity, its vitality, its quality of life. And so I look at things like the growth of China militarily and economically. And I see opportunities there. For instance, the president announced a couple months back that he wanted to pull out of the ICBM treaty that has been in place now more than 30 years. And then Putin said that they would pull out of the ICBM treaty between the United States and Russia. There's a 6-month window to be able to do that. But assuming that happens, to make lemonade out of lemons, what I would do is to try and forge an updated 21st century version of that draws in a nation like China, knowing that in the decades to come, that is going to be an issue, a country with capacity that we have to concern ourselves with more and more. So it's those types of things that are forward-looking that relate to the threats ahead of us, not just what we've been dealing with or we're dealing with today, that particularly interest me.
Half the nation on the far left and the far right are non-interventionists. They're uninterested in foreign affairs, much less in how to lead them, calling for pulling back and focused only on domestic concerns. As a result, there are foreign policy thinkers like Bob Kagan at Brookings, who's written an entire book warning about the collapse of the international liberal small d democratic order, and that without U.S. leadership, that order will collapse. And in fact, it's in the process of collapsing. Is the era of American global leadership over, to your mind?
Not if I were president, no, it wouldn't be.
So what would you do to change that? Because, I mean, we've seen over the last few elections, the American people are, between the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and the turmoil in the Middle East and everywhere, they don't want America to be the global cop.
No, I agree with that. I agree that we can't be a global cop for every type of conflict that exists out there. However, I do believe that people agree that we should reclaim our leadership with regard to human rights. Instead of cozying up to some of these dictators, call them out for their human rights abuses across the world. And that we have a role in leading on freedom, democracy, and opportunity without making the mistakes, or maybe better said, learning the lessons of the last 20 years of not jumping into things like Iraq that were clearly a mistake for us to make, not overextending ourselves, but we can and should repair our alliances with Europe, support institutions like NATO, even as we seek to make improvements in institutions like NATO that have helped to keep the world safer. So I don't think people are against that part of it. I think what people are tired of are, the loss of life, the expense in every single way that we've dedicated to Iraq and to Afghanistan over these last 15 to 18 years.
For real now this time, before we go to questions, I want to throw up on the screen here a tweet that captured my attention on April 1st at 5:38 p.m. from someone who goes by the handle @Ron from San Diego. As you can see here, I just learned that there's a smart, articulate, Harvard-educated mayor running for president. Bring on the nonstop fawning coverage from mainstream media pundits. This one actually ran a large city and was also a cabinet secretary, by the way.
So that was April Fool's Day. He was giving the media too much credit. All right.
Yeah, but he makes a very good point, and that is, you went to Harvard. Mayor Pete went to Harvard. Mayor Pete's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, where my notes say South Bend, Indiana has, 104,000 people, something like that. And San Antonio, where you were mayor twice, 1.49 million people. Seventh largest city, I think?
Yeah.
Seventh largest city in the country. Why don't you think you are getting the same amount of attention and coverage as, say, Mayor Pete, when you're both, your resumes are similar, you're close in age, you're the first and only Latino Hispanic American running for president. He's openly LGBT married man, first one running for president. Why is he getting all the attention and not you?
You know, first of all, I think he's a phenomenal candidate and supremely talented. And I'm like everybody else, I'm excited about his candidacy and many others because it's great to see the big tent party that we have. I mean, you compare what the Democratic Party has in terms of the people running this year, it's groundbreaking, and so it's wonderful to see. The short answer to your question is I don't know, but I do believe that I'm doing like the work of building up support for my campaign steadily. I'm not interested necessarily in being the front runner in April of 2019. What I want is to be the front runner in the spring of 2020 when the voting actually starts. And so, I've told people, like, I wasn't born a front runner, I didn't grow up a front runner, that I'm going out there and I'm doing what our families do, which is working hard, putting the building blocks of a successful campaign in place. I do think that as we get closer and closer and people get more and more attuned to the race and, okay, who am I actually going to vote for? Who do I believe could walk into the Oval Office and do a good job there? That my executive experience at HUD and as mayor of the seventh largest city will count for more and more. And also that I do represent a new generation of leadership, like several of the other people there. And that I've articulated a compelling, strong vision for the future of the country. I see it as very early. We still have 42 weeks until the Iowa caucus. But who's counting, right?
42 weeks.
42 weeks.
I hear what you're saying. Naleo Latino Decisions just released their spring 2019 national poll last week. You ranked 4th out of the top 5. Why don't you think you're the pick for Latino voters in the country? You're 4th out of 5.
Well, I think that my name ID still is not what the name ID of Bernie or Vice President Biden or a couple of the other people is, and that as my name ID picks up, what you're going to see is those numbers start to change. And that's what I'm looking forward to over the course of the next several months, including especially this series of debates that we're going to have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that that's going to change. That's right, whether it was Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter, we've had several people who've won the presidency that started off between 1% and 5%, mm-hmm. right? And so right now I'm between like 1% and 3% in different polls.
And so by that, you're looking for your Barack Obama Iowa moment where everything turns on a dime, that everyone will coalesce.
I mean, that among other things. I mean, these days, it's also who has a viral moment, right? I mean, there's so many different ways that people actually get attention and are able to take advantage of that. But more than anything else, I want to put the building blocks of organizing in place in these early states, and I'm confident that there'll be good opportunity to stand out.
And I can't let you mention the debates, and I want to make sure everyone understands. Polling-wise, you've reached the threshold to make the stage mm-hmm. in June. Fundraising-wise?
So if 20 people meet the polling requirement, which is possible now because we may have 22 people running, then they go to whether or not, the DNC goes to whether or not you've hit 65,000 unique contributions. And we're not quite at 65. We're closing in on that, but we're not quite at 65,000 contributions. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go to this question from, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, Peter Vinalia. His question is, Donald Trump was able to receive a higher percentage of the Hispanic vote than I thought he would. Than I thought he would. Well, I have no idea. I'm sorry, Peter. I cannot read what that word is, but. Oh, it should be zero. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. It should be zero. Why and what can we do to reduce that percentage?
I mean, you're always going to have some built-in, base, especially of religious conservatives who, on the issue of choice, are just not going to be with the Democratic candidate. So you peel off some of that. Also, you have, of course, the uniqueness of some communities, like the Cuban-American community in South Florida that still has the tradition of being a little bit more conservative, and the Mexican-American community of Texas, which is probably a few points more conservative than the Mexican-American community of Arizona, Colorado, certainly California. And it's not a monolithic community. At the same time, I mean, Hillary still got, I think, 69% of the Latino vote, and Obama in 2012 had gotten 71%. So the difference was not, it was about the same, I believe that if I'm the nominee, that I can go back and pick up Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which we lost collectively by less than 80,000 votes, and then go get the 11 electoral votes of Arizona, the 29 electoral votes of Florida, and the 38 electoral votes of my home state of Texas for 78 electoral votes. We need to secure the Midwest and then go and secure the future, and that's the future.
This is a great question, and I cannot read the name of the person. But if you recognize the question, scream. What proposals do you have to stimulate job creation as AI, robotics, and e-commerce kill off more and more traditional job categories?
Yeah.
There you go.
I think, first of all, making sure that we understand as a country where the opportunities are, because as many people have pointed out, as our economy shifts, it creates job opportunities in different spots, right? Understanding that and being able to train folks to take on those kinds of jobs. I also support, for instance, embracing the new energy economy, investing in sustainability and renewable energy. I see something like the Green New Deal. I like the concept of the Green New Deal as a great way to actually not only protect our planet, but also to create jobs and opportunity in the future. We've seen that in Texas with the solar energy industry, the wind energy industry. So I would look for these 21st century ways to create new job opportunities, including by investing in things like battery storage, which is going to be crucial to extending or expanding the value of solar and wind and other renewables. On top of that, we have to recognize that because of what's happening with AI, but also what's happening with this gig economy, people driving Uber, people driving Lyft, we're moving basically to more of a self-employment economy, right? And a contractor-based model, independent contractor instead of employer-employee relationship. To me, that means that the government has a more robust role in providing a strong safety net with universal health care coverage, right? Some people have suggested universal basic income as well, and I support what Senator Booker has introduced in the Senate, which is piloting universal basic income, I think in like 25 or 50 different communities to see how that would work, right? That's something radically different from what we're used to, but I do think that that's part of understanding and be prepared for as our economy shifts. So those are the types of things that I would do. In a more traditional way, I would invest a lot more in incentivize small business creation. We've all been, we've read and we've been hung up a lot of times in this country on big business relocations. Y'all had Amazon that was here, that was looking at locating their second headquarters, and they were going to get a $3 billion incentive package, including, as I understand it, $500 million in direct incentives. I would rather invest those kinds of resources in small business creation, because small businesses make up more than 75% of the jobs in communities across the country, and try and grow them.
Something you said when you were talking about universal basic income. I can hear it. I heard the shrieks in my head of Republicans saying socialism. How do you push back against that charge?
That they called Medicare socialism. They, I'm sure, called Social Security socialism at one point. What we're calling for is just a safety net for the 21st century, and a safety net that is fair to everybody. And I've been very encouraged to see that a lot of these proposals actually poll well with the American public. Y'all may remember that a few months ago, Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, suggested that perhaps the top marginal tax rate could go up to, maybe as high as 70%. And Fox News, lost their, and
no one's watching.
Yeah,
Speak your mind.
And then they actually polled it, and in one poll, 45% of Republicans even said that they agreed with raising the top marginal tax rate to up to 70%. And that's because people see the result of 40 years of tax policy that has burdened more and more the middle class and the lower middle class, and expected less and less from these very wealthy corporations and from people at the very top. And they understand that we have to go in a different direction, even if they don't agree with every part of an agenda.
Well, even as we saw when Senator Bernie Sanders, yet another person running for president, went on Fox and gave his pitch for Medicare for All, and the Fox audience sitting there roared with applause, which is rather shocking to, I think, a lot of people. Kate in Harlem says this: I quit my job to start a business in 2010. Many other millennials have started small one-person businesses. What policies of yours would help us, considering we don't have access to company-matched 401ks, child care, or health care?
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of needing to fill that gap that exists on child care, on health care, on educational opportunities. We need a robust and fair safety net for the 21st century, because you have more people that are self-employed or they're independent contractors. I guess those overlap to a great extent. That means that the government, as I see it, is going to have to step in and provide a more robust safety net.
So what you're talking about in just now, universal health care, your plans on immigration, is going to require, how shall we say, cooperation with Congress. And Jamie Pessin asks this question that I think fits into this, and she asks, what is your plan to break congressional gridlock, and this is another issue, on gun violence prevention, so that we can enact common sense solutions like background checks that most Americans agree we need? Most Americans agree we need a common sense gun violence legislation. We need health care. We need a safety net, and they all poll very, very well, and yet for some reason those polls never make it to Capitol Hill, where they turn into action and turn into legislation. How are you going to break the congressional gridlock?
Yeah, 2 days ago we marked the 20th anniversary of Columbine, and people will remember when Columbine happened that it was such a shock to the system, and it was a once in a blue moon kind of occurrence. And now it seems like something like that happens, every week somewhere, maybe not at that scale, but still a mass shooting. And if you go by a strict definition, I believe, of 3 or more people or 4 or more people, even more frequently than that. So the question is, how would I break the gridlock? Well, first of all, I believe that at 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, 2021, that we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. And I came up through local politics, and in local politics where I'm from, it was nonpartisan. So I had to go and knock on the doors of people who were Republican, they were conservative, people who were libertarian, people that didn't agree with me, and try and get them to be supportive of what I wanted to accomplish for the city. One of the things that we were able to do was to get the voters to support increasing the sales tax by 1/8 of a cent to expand high-quality full-day pre-K. And I got the business community that was fairly conservative there in San Antonio, Texas, to come along with education activists and community activists to present a united front to the community, and we got that done. I would do everything that I could to reach out to Congress and to get and muster enough support to get common sense gun reform done. At the same time, if the decision is between common sense gun reform and adhering to the 60 vote requirement, the filibuster, I would get common sense gun reform done for the United States of America. Same thing with healthcare. I would get healthcare done for our country. Because what we've seen is that, Mitch McConnell and the leaders in the Senate will, even when 90% or 88% of Americans support something like universal background checks, just for political reasons, will not give the president a quote-unquote victory on these things. And not only that, they're also influenced by special interests like the NRA that are contributing millions and millions of dollars to their campaign. In the long run, what I would do is push a series of institutional reforms. Some of these are already on the table that, through H.R. 1, going to independent or bipartisan redistricting in the states, so that you're getting people in these congressional districts that have a more mixed constituency in terms of their partisanship, so people have to reach out to folks that may not agree with them. Secondly, trying to overcome the effects of the Citizens United decision to try and get big money out of politics so that these special interests cannot have the same sway time and time again over how people vote. Thirdly, to increase the transparency. I would make Congress subject to the Freedom of Information Act because they exempted themselves from that. And if you should be able to know what your mayor or your city council are saying over email, or the documents that they're passing around, how they're interacting with people that give them money on the record, and also know that at the state level in Albany, then you should know that from your representatives in Washington, D.C. too. And so I would make FOIA applicable to Congress and become more transparent. I think all of those things would, over time, have the effect of reducing some of the polarization that we have and getting people in office that have to work to a greater extent with each other and for the benefit of all Americans.
I have two questions I want to ask you because I'm looking at the clock and we're running out of time. You have a twin brother.
Yeah.
Identical twin brother.
Yeah.
And
who's in Congress?
Who's in Congress, Congressman Julián Castro. And there have been times, I'm going to admit, when I have seen one of you and I'm like, I don't know which one. We may have spoken at one time, and I was like, oh my God, this is the congressman, or is it the secretary? I don't know. How can we tell you apart? Before your brother had a beard.
I'm the good-looking one. I'm the good-looking one. All right? My brother always says that I'm a minute uglier than he is. Like that is his run. That's been his running joke for the last 20 years. Like 20 years. I once showed up at this I think it was like a public housing complex. And my brother had been there 2 weeks earlier, and this little kid, he must have been like 6 years old, starts saying, "You're the ugly one, you're the ugly one."
And I don't know if people know this. So they're twins. You both went to Stanford, mm-hmm. And then you both went to Harvard Law School, and then you both moved back to Texas. He lived with you
For a year, yeah. He lived with me for the first year. And
So how many years are we talking? Now,
Well, and then we shared bunk beds growing up for a time.
I mean-
But we never lived together in the same dorm at Stanford or Harvard because.
So you did have your own.
We did, yeah. We lived in the same, but we never lived in the same room. Like we didn't share a room, and we lived in dorms all 7 years. Yeah, I mean we're very close. People that have twins, or hopefully you're not like the third wheel with the siblings that are twins. You know, the twins either stay together like we have, or they try and do everything they can to separate. I met a set of twins like that once. Like they were hell-bent on trying to be different from each other.
So what you're saying is you were the twins that dressed alike. I'm
Well,
kidding.
you know, yeah, when we were young,
Yeah, right.
yeah. Although my mom wouldn't let us do that after, after the baby clothes ran out. Like she made it a point not to dress us the same way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. I want to end on a serious note. And as we've alluded, the 21st candidate to probably jump into the race is most likely going to be former Vice President Biden. He leads every poll that's out there. Respond to the contention that I've been hearing and a lot of other people have been hearing that a white male is what's needed for the next Democratic nominee. After 8 years, I said I wanted to end this on a serious note. But seriously, after 8 years of the first black president, is the nation ready for another first in the Oval Office?
Oh, no doubt. I believe so. I believe so.
Okay.
And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't even be running. You know, part of this for all of us who are running is to put our faith in the American people. And so absolutely, I believe that they are. And the way that I think about this is, first of all, it's a wonderful thing, as I said earlier, to see the diversity of this field of candidates, whether it's Mayor Buttigieg, who would be a historic nominee, or my candidacy, or a number of the women who are running. I mean, in 2020, we're going to be marking 100 years of women's suffrage in September of 2020. So it's just a groundbreaking field of candidates. I believe that the United States is ready for that kind of leadership again. At the same time, I tell people I also wouldn't X out one of the white male candidates just because they're a white male. We're going to go through this process, and people are going to float their ideas and what they stand for and their experience and their vision for the country, right? And I think people are going to determine who the nominee should be based on all of those things and their electability against this president, because I agree that it's an imperative that we change leaders. So I disagree with people that say it has to be a white male candidate. I also would disagree with people that say that under no circumstances should it be or can it be a white male candidate. I mean, that's why we're going to have this process. And I just look forward to articulating my own ideas. And I believe that by the spring of 2020, that I'm going to pick up a lot of support. And I hope to get yours. So thank you.
Secretary Julián Castro, good luck out there.
Thank you very much for being here.